Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to StarCraft 2 Strategy. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Protoss strategy. More specifically, we're going to be taking a look at a 4 warp gate build involving proxy pylons against a Terran player who's going for that Marine Marauder build. Now, before we get too far into things here, the Protoss player we're looking at in this strategy replay is Mouse's Mana, and our Terran opponent here is Jimpo. So we're going to go ahead and go straight into Mana Vision. So again, we are looking at a Protoss strategy, but specifically that 4 warp gate build with proxy pylons added in as well. Now, of course, the 4 warp gate build being pretty standard, pretty comfortable for a lot of Protoss players, and that's essentially the maximum number or the optimal number of gateways that you'd be working off of on a one base play to allow you to use up all of your resources and then go for a little bit of higher tech, such as a robotics facility. But specifically, we're looking at timing, a specific type of timing push, and use of that proxy pylon. Now, obviously, you know why proxy pylons are going to be good. With warp gate research, you can warp in units anywhere that you have pylon power. So if you can get a pylon at or near your opponent's base, it's going to allow you to warp in units closer. Obviously, that's good. The second thing is that timing. And what I want to say is, specifically when it comes to warp gate builds, there are two points in the game that you're vulnerable or that you're at a disadvantage. Now, at this first point here that you're vulnerable is up until you get your warp gate research complete. While you're researching it and while you're running off of only 1 or 2 gateways producing units, you are vulnerable to an early push from Marines and Marauders from a Terran player. And then after your warp gate research is done and after some time has passed from that point, you become vulnerable to a Terran player who masses up and reaches that critical mass of Marines and Marauders. And there's a sweet spot right in between. Basically, if you're able to hit them essentially as soon as your warp gate tech is finished researching, that's going to be an optimal time for you, because at that point in the game, after you warp in your first wave of units and you have your second wave prepared to warp in as soon as the cooldown is finished, you're going to be at a huge army advantage at that point. So essentially what you're looking to do is get up that warp gate research as quick as you can, warp in that first batch of units, hit your opponent, and then warp in that second batch immediately. And if you can do that effectively, you should be able to overpower them at that point. Again, if you wait too long and you stay on one base play, and if you don't tech up to higher tech such as Colossi or High Templar, then you're going to be at a disadvantage versus a Terran player going for that Marine Marauder medevac build. Now, before we go any further, I do want to go ahead and just take note of the build order here, what we're looking at. Started off with pretty standard stuff with a 9 pylon, and then a 12 supply. We got our first gateway. Obviously, we've created our first zealot and we're pushing out with that. Now, I do want to go back to this real quick, but of course I want to finish up this build order. So the 9 pylon and the 12 gateway, we followed that up with a 14 Assimilator. Then a 20 supply, we went ahead and we dropped our Cybernetics Core. Now that Cybernetics Core is up, we're going to start researching that warp gate research very shortly. Now, what I wanted to mention about here, as you saw, we moved up our Zealot and we were doing some harassment. Now that's great, but the key component here is the fact that we had this probe with us, because this probe is what's going to allow us to drop a proxy pylon in our opponent's base. And in a map such as this, specifically Delta Quadrant, you have this giant base here with a lot of dark areas, but on top of that, you also have this kind of natural expansion base, and if you can manage to sneak a proxy pylon somewhere that they're not likely to check early on, you're going to be in a really good position. Now again, I do want to say that both these players are really strong players, and this just goes to show you that this can happen to anybody. No one's perfect, and people don't always scout the entirety of their base or everything around their base. So again, if you can manage to get a proxy pylon in a really good position, very close or in your opponent's base, then you're going to be in a really good position once you do finally push out. So we're going to go back and take a look at the build order. We did start researching that warp gate research at 24 supply, and then at 27 supply and 28 supply respectively, we got these 2 additional gateways, and then at 30 supply we dropped this gateway here, as well as our additional simulator. Now, something I do want to say as to the final gateway that you're dropping when you're going for a warp gate tech, if you're going for that 4 gate build, you do want to make sure that that 4th warp gate starts building at about the time you're 3/4 of the way complete this warp gate research. Basically, that's going to make it so that as soon as it finishes, your gateway should be coming up and you'll be able to turn it into a warp gate almost immediately. So this is the time I was talking about. This is that timing push I mentioned earlier, where you're going to be in the best position. As soon as your warp gate research is done and you do have those 4 warp gates up and ready to go, that's when you want to start warping in your first wave of units. We're taking advantage again of this proxy pylon here and warping into the back of his base. And then once you can push out at this point, and then as soon as you're capable, as soon as that second wave of units is able to be warped in, you want to do that immediately. And at that point, you should have a stronger force than your opponent. See, as you can see, that second wave of warp gates just finished, that cooldown finished, and we warped in our units, and now we're going to be pushing out. Now this is going to be a two-prong attack. As you can see, our opponent did fortify the front of his base with this bunker. So what we're going to be doing is, since we managed to sneak in that pylon in the back of his base, we're warping in units there, we're pushing at him from the side, and then going to be moving in the front, because obviously he'll be pulling his Marines out of this bunker to deal with a threat in the back. So hitting him in these 2 spots is going to do 2 things. It's going to split up his forces, and it's going to make him vulnerable, essentially. Now, he's got a lot here, and he is pushing out with his SCVs, which is threatening to our Stalkers, so we did want to pull them back until we got these Zealots into play here to kind of act as a meat shield. But it's diverting his forces, and again, since we're in that stronger position, that timing that I talked about, when our warp gate research is just finished, since we're in that strong position as far as army size is concerned, if you can get him to split up his forces when you have a larger army, you're going to be the one that prevails. So yeah, and that's, as you can see, it was too much for the Terran player to handle. He does go ahead and call good game. He just didn't have enough production ability compared to our 4 warp gate. We can just get units on the board so quickly, get reinforcements so quickly, and he's just not capable of doing that at this point in the game. So again, guys, this was for StarCraft 2 strategy. We're going to go ahead and take a look one more time at that build order before we go any further. We had that 9 Pylon followed by the 12 Gateway, the 14 Assimilator, 20 Cybernetics Core. At 24, we started researching that warp gate research, and then at 27, 28, and 30, we got our 3 additional gateways. And again, we pushed out. We took advantage of the fact that we were able to get that proxy pylon inside of his base. Now again, don't worry, don't think that this timing push isn't going to work unless you get a pylon inside of their base. If you can drop one somewhere near the outside of their base, just basically you want to be able to get reinforcements quickly, and that'll do as well. That will suffice. Dropping a pylon over here, warping in units while you do your push, it's going to work just as well for you. So again, guys, this has been for StarCraft 2 strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what you see here, please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. I would suggest moving out a probe to create some proxy pylons. Like, for example, one right here would be fantastic. It would provide for incredibly fast reinforcements to this push. But here's exactly what I'm talking about. He's moving up, trying to get a surround on our Stalkers, and we're just using the blink to pull back Stalkers when they get low.